the promises God has given to him. And so Jacob went on his journey, and he came to the land of the people of the east. And he would spend 20 years there. And he looked and he saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all of the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And Jacob said to them as he approaches this whole scene, "My brethren, where are you from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." And then he said to them, and he realizes he has reached his destination, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" And they said, "We know him." I don't know how they said that. They might have said it like that, knowing Laban. And he said to them, "Is he well?" And they said, "He is well. And look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep." And it's about noon. And then he said to this group of 3 flocks around this well at noontime. Now, there is nothing that drives a Jacob more crazy than inefficiency. And here they are, they're supposed to water the flocks at the end of the day. You don't water the flocks at noon, you graze the flocks until the end of the day so they can get fattened up, and you water them at the end of the day. And here's a group of people that are bringing their flocks to the well in the middle of the day. It's a waste to him. He sees there's a way to make more money. There's a way to do this better. It's too early to be doing what it is that they're doing here. He said, "Look, it's still high day. It's not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go feed them." But they said, "We cannot until all of the flocks are gathered together and they've rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and then we water the sheep. Don't confuse us with facts. This is the way we do it. This is the way we've always done it." Now, Jacob hasn't had cross-cultural training here, and he's insensitive to their customs, but his way is right for what he thinks is best, and that is multiplication of the flocks. Now, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and he rolled the stone from the well's mouth. I think he's a little bit, the term Bob used, smitten. And I don't know how many people it took to roll this stone away from the well here, but he does it all by himself. Guys, you recognize it, don't you? We'll deal with the backaches later. Torn muscles. Impressions are what are important here. And he watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And then Jacob kissed Rachel, and it was a common greeting, and he lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son, and so she ran and told her father. And then it came to pass when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, embraced him, kissed him, and brought him into his house. And so he told Laban all of these things, all about Isaac and Rebekah and how they're doing. And Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And so Jacob stayed with him for a month. And Jacob, being the kind of man that he was, didn't eat potato chips and watch television every day. He began to work immediately for his uncle. And then Laban, after a month, says to him, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? You're working for nothing now. You deserve a wage, even though you are a relative. Tell me, what should your wages be?" Those are words that an employee likes to hear. And now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were delicate or tender or weak or dull or something is what the word means as it relates to that. But Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. She's a knockout. Now Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Now, can you imagine what this did to Rachel? 7 years. Wow, what a guy. Man. Now, he has no dowry that he can offer. He has no riches that he can offer. So he's willing to work 7 years to earn the right for this man's daughter that he has absolutely fallen in love with, and fallen in love with in a very real way, as he's going to manifest in just a short time here. And so he says, listen, for 7 years I will serve you for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, he's a negotiator, it's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. You got a deal. And so Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed but a few days to him because of the love that he had. And his love was very, very genuine towards her. And this is a beautiful, one of the most beautiful pictures in the entire Old Testament as it relates to true love. Here is this guy, and he serves for 7 years to get her, and it says it seemed but just a few days to him because of the love that he had for her. That's something. There are marks to true love that we learn from this particular passage. One of the things that I think is so important to understand, especially if you are a single person, when the Bible describes love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love that comes from God, one of the marks of that love, he says, is that it is long-suffering. It is patient. God's love is patient. Now, there's a balance here that's an interesting kind of thing to walk through, because there's a place where patience serves us very well in our involvement with one another, certainly as it relates to heading towards a commitment as vital as marriage. And yet Paul says, listen, don't wait 7 years if you're burning for one another. Now, it doesn't mean marry someone you're not supposed to marry just because you're burning with lust. But it says you don't have to wait forever to marry either. And so some people marry relatively quickly upon coming into contact with one another, and it works out well. Others marry very quickly, and it doesn't work out so well. Some wait a while, and it works well for them. Others wait a while, and it's still a disaster, because they both remain selfish individuals and fail to obey God's Word, or at least one of them does. But really, one of the things that is so important as it relates to love, and the love that you want to found a relationship on, is that it is patient. It will endure time. It will wait. And I think that time is your friend in relationships. Certainly relationships that are headed towards marriage. It is your friend. Patience is your friend, because you get to learn about what the other person is like in all environments. Do you think that Rachel and Jacob knew each other pretty well after 7 years? And I'm not advocating 7 years as a length of time for engagement. But they probably knew each other pretty well by then. They'd seen each other at their best and at their worst, and with makeup and without makeup, and, blowing their top over this, and, walking patiently, and all of these kinds of things. But one of the things about giving a little time to a relationship is that there are fewer surprises later. Because anyone can put on appearances for a period of time, but it really, over a period of time you get a chance to see what a person is completely like. And I think that when love is willing to make the sacrifice that Jacob was willing to make, it says something about the love that he has. It reveals that the love that he has is a genuine love, that it is a mature love, that he is willing to sacrifice to get you, sacrifice to get her. And I would commend any sister in the Lord, any woman, period, as a matter of fact. Ladies, do not give your heart to a man unless he is willing to sacrifice to get you. Willing to sacrifice in terms of love. Make sure that there's a real love that's there. Make sure that there's a real commitment that's there. And that becomes manifest over a period of time. And Rachel looks, and you think Rachel was bummed over the 7. No, she looks 7 years, and for me, and I mean, imagine how she felt over that whole thing. I think another thing that teaches us here in terms of this marriage thing, and that was important concerning Rachel and Jacob, and I would encourage, again, any woman, and that is, ladies, choose a man who's not afraid to work hard. It seems like a simple thing, but it's not really so simple a thing. Jacob, for all of his faults, and God is going to work these faults out in his life, but Jacob was a hard worker. He was a hard worker. He was a responsible man. He was a man of initiative. And so she had to be pleased by that. And notice what it says in verse 21. And then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled." Apparently Laban, the 7 years had come, and he wasn't handing over his daughter to be Jacob's wife. And so finally Jacob comes and says, "Listen, I've fulfilled my 7 years. Give her to me as wife, that I may go into her." That is to consummate the marriage, to have the marriage ceremony, and then to become involved with her sexually. And so they are absolutely pure as it related to the entire 7 years. And we learn an awful lot as it relates to that here in this passage. God commands concerning sex. And He says that marriage is honorable among all, and the bed is undefiled. There is nothing wrong with the sexual relationship in marriage. But fornicators and adulterers God will judge. And God has reserved the sexual relationship for the marriage relationship, for the environment of commitment to one another. It's for that kind of a love. And may I say, and this is to the women, but it's also to the men, because the women have come a long ways, baby, today. But ladies, if they are not willing to marry you, but they want to go to bed with you, will you look them in the face and say to them, "Do I look like a stupid idiot to you?" Because when a man will do that, when he will try to do that, what he is saying to you, he says, "I don't want to marry you, I just want to go to bed with you." He's saying that you're not good enough to marry, you're just good enough to go to bed with. And you better hear him when he's communicating that to you. And you better say, "Hit the road, toad. Get out of my face, get out of my place, get out of my life." Now, I understand that sometimes we can find ourselves in places that we ought not to, and things can progress to a certain place, and you regret that in terms of even cutting it off before it heads into something forbidden, and a man can be repentant, and I don't want you to break off a relationship related to something like that. But very often among men, and we like to think that it is uncommon among those who call themselves Christians. I would like to think that. But I don't think that. But very often concerning men, and also concerning women, but he will say anything to get you in bed. "Oh, I really love you. Oh, I've never met anyone like you before in my whole life." I thought I knew love, but I didn't know love until I fell in love with you. You're the one, and I would marry you, except that we've just got to get this, and this in way, and be sure I will marry you. Absolutely, Scout's honor, and I will surely do that, and someday we'll get married soon as this is in the way. But I repeat, and you may say, you may be uncomfortable with the baseness of the sermon at this point in time, but it's the way that things are today. The way they've always been, really. But I repeat, if he will not marry you first, then he is screaming at the top of his lungs, you are not good enough. You are not good enough to marry. You are only good enough to go to bed with. And it's the same thing vice versa if the woman is that way. The person can sit. And I encourage you, singles who are going together, growing in your relationship in the Lord with one another and in your friendship with one another. Do that. Do that. In your commitment to one another. To stay pure. God knows what He's talking about. Knows what He's talking about. And you look and over here and you can see this Christian or that Christian or this Christian and that Christian, and they're sexually involved with one another. They're going to bed with one another, and they have no conscience as it relates to that. And you look at it and you say, well, what difference does it make? And you say, well, I've known people who were going to bed together as Christians, and he did say he would marry them, and he ended up marrying them. And is there anything wrong with that? I mean, they ended up married, didn't they? Yes, there is something wrong with that. Because you're marrying someone who is not committed to Christ. And you are in the same condition, no matter what you tell each other, how spiritual you are. You're marrying a person who will obey when it's convenient for them, and they will disobey when it's convenient for them. And that's who you're marrying. And when you marry that person, they will be the same way once you've married them. Oh, no, I'll change him. Oh, no, you won't. What a man is single, he is more of married. And what a woman is single, she is more of married. If you want to see change, you see change before you say, I do. That's the only safe change. So a person looks and says, well, you know what? Well, you are marrying a person who is willing to live in disobedience to God. You are marrying a person, you have no idea what their commitment is to the Lord, or their commitment is to you at all. Disobedience is their God. Sex is their God. So it's a huge risk. You can end up marrying a stranger. You end up marrying someone you think, oh, it's deeply spiritual. Just this one problem. There's just one lack of obedience. I mean, he or she, they can hardly help it, in this day and age. We're just, we have, our sexual drives are so much higher today than in the days of Jacob and Rachel. Oh, yes, sure they are. There's such wisdom behind what God has to say. Even if two people are involved with one another sexually, they call themselves Christians, and they end up marrying. The problem is that once you begin a physical relationship, as a part of a relationship, all other areas of the relationship cease to develop as they should. Because now sex becomes the focus of the relationship. Everything else revolves around that. And whatever development there is in the relationship occurs after the satisfaction of the sexual relationship. And so everything else ceases to develop that God intended to develop when a man and a woman are going together and headed towards marriage. It just stops. And what has been developed atrophies, and you end up marrying an emotional, intellectual stranger. So I thought I knew them. And somebody say, well, as they come in for counseling, or you meet someone somewhere and say, well, do you really know this person very well? Oh, we've been to bed together. Oh, well, boy, oh boy. Man, you know everything then, don't you? Oh, you don't know anything. We've had sex together. It means nothing. It doesn't mean anything at all. So important for the fullness of the relationship to be able to develop. God knows what He's talking about. And here, this beautiful thing here with Jacob and with Rachel in their obedience. And it's that kind of a love, that self-sacrificing kind of a love that a marriage can be built on anyway. Eros love is not a good foundation for marriage. And so as you obey the Lord in this, then the relationship develops and God, and you know that this man over here, he loves God and he loves you. And if he loves God and if he loves you, he will wait. And if she loves God and she loves you, she will wait. If he loves himself or she loves himself, then they will not wait. And God has given you a wonderful screen, a wonderful sifter to determine whether a person loves you really or just loves themselves and they want to bring you into that whole nightmare. And that is to say no until you are married. It is the best creep sifter on the face of the planet. And I'm serious. I'm serious. So many disasters. So many disasters. Heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. You single people, listen. Agape will wait. It's long-suffering. Eros won't wait. Because it says, I love you. I love me, so I love you. Oh, look out. Run for your life. And so here is Jacob, Rachel, willing to wait the 7 years. It moves quickly. Moves quickly with that kind of love. And Laban gathered together all of the men of the place, and he made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Now they're heavily, got all of these gowns on, and all of these, sashes and everything, all of the veils. And so he takes and does the old switcheroo now on Jacob. And does the old, and Jacob is going to be surprised. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. And so it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this that you've done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you for 7 years? Why then have you deceived me? And can you imagine in his mind, perhaps God brought just that slightest flashback of skins on his hands and skins on the back of his neck in his deception of his father. There is, I don't think, any better way to have the Jacob removed from my life than to have God put me with another Jacob. It works very well, tremendously well. Very, very well. And it is amazing how bad my sin looks on you. It looks wonderful on me. Looks tremendous on me. But on you, it looks terrible. And I think it's very effective. And God takes and He brings people into our lives that are exactly like some area that He's trying to deal with in our life. And it takes us the longest time to understand that's what it is that He's doing. It is very effective. Very effective and a common methodology of God. And Laban said, oh, it must not be. Didn't I tell you? We've got a custom in our country that we must not be done so in our country. To give the younger before the firstborn, fulfill her week, her marriage feast week, the honeymoon, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he also gave him his daughter Rachel his wife also. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. And then Jacob also went in to Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years. And when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb. But Rachel was barren. And so Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, which means, behold, a son. For she said, the Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. I feel for Leah in this all the way. And God is going to do something very precious for her, as we'll see in a moment. And then she conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, He has therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon, which means hearing. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I've borne him 3 sons. And therefore she called his name Levi, which means attachment. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, now I will praise the Lord. She was a believer in the Lord, a lover of the Lord. And therefore she called his name Judah. And then she stopped bearing. And Judah means praise. And Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It is through Leah and not through Rachel that Jesus would